Hey everyone, this is Beardo and you're watching Minutia Minute. It's time for more of the modern age history of Batman, as always. Yesterday we wrapped up the Batman Hush storyline, which, as I said yesterday, was a really important storyline, not just for Batman comics, but for comics in general. It really changed the way DC and Marvel were competing against each other at the time. It also kind of changed the way that editors sort of approached books. There became a lot more books where you'd have a writer and artist definitively on a book for a finite period of time, and they'd tell their story and then they'd leave. Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee, after they'd done with Hush, they weren't doing more Batman. They went on to do their own thing. And there came this moment of, okay, what's DC gonna do next? Because Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee, at the beginning of their Batman run, they had Batman basically right at sort of its level point for sales. Nothing spectacular, nothing terrible. And then, of course, Hush hit, and it just literally went through the roof. So how do you follow something like that up? And DC, in my opinion, actually made a really, really smart decision, which is that they picked stories that were broad enough that you could really sort of sink your teeth in them and kind of get to know them, but they're also straightforward enough and stand-alone enough that you didn't need to be totally steeped in Batman lore to get it. So a lot of the new readers that they gained after Batman Hush, they really tried to take advantage of that by bringing two in particular, stories that were very finite in length, very straightforward to understand, and very, very new reader-friendly, basically. And for these stories, they picked a couple of sort of superstar creative teams, like they did with Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee. But to sort of knock it up a notch and make it a little bit more quirky, they picked, I don't want to say less tried and true talent. These are now especially sort of legends in the industry at this point because they've been with us for so long now. But they weren't as tried and true in mainstream comics as they were at the time. Now our first storyline is Broken City, and it is by Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Risso, who at this point were probably most famous for their work on 100 Bullets, and this was sort of the beginning of their journey into the sort of the greater DCU outside of the Vertigo line. And so, there was a sort of a little bit of mystery there of, how are these people going to approach Batman and what are they going to do to sort of take it to the next level. And what they give us is a really, really great murder mystery. In Broken City, you have this woman who is, I think, a prostitute, if I remember correctly, and she's been murdered, and there are lots of possible suspects. You've got Killer Croc, you've got some of her relatives, her brother is sort of under suspicion. The Penguin and Ventriloquist get into it, as you can see on the cover here for 622, and Batman becomes more and more invested in this murder and finding out what's going on, because for two reasons. Obviously, it is a story of orphanship, because this woman had a little boy, and Batman, of course, always takes that kind of thing personally, right? And then, on another level, though, it sort of is a murder that for him is speaking volumes about sort of this broken city that is Gotham, and sort of like this, decrepit Roman Empire or something like that, that he sees and lives in. It is in and of itself a living, breathing character. Now, this isn't the kind of living, breathing character that the city becomes when someone like Scott Snyder brings, Night of Owls or something like that. It's not a matter of history, it's much more a matter of emotion and just essence, and just sort of, something that's a lot less tangible. Now, the storyline continues here in number 623, and we get the addition of a couple of new characters, Fat Man and Little Boy, before things really start to come to a head, and you sort of have the big culmination of events in 624, and just when you think Batman solved the murderer, or solved the crime, and the murderer is basically her brother, he finds out at the very end that, in fact, it was the little boy that was the son of this prostitute that murdered his own mother. And obviously that leaves Batman in a very dark place after that. It's a really, really kind of gut-wrenching story. It's very vivid, it's very raw, and it's not the fluff that you got in Batman Hush, and you've got this new team on board that is, you know, taking some risks, and it really made for 6 months of very interesting Batman stories. Now, after that, they followed it up with, in my opinion, not as good of a story, but it does have some of the same characteristics in terms of sort of editorial choices. You've got some, you know, young up-and-coming writers and artists. In this case, it's going to be Judd Winick, who at this point was probably just doing Outsiders if he hadn't started it maybe. I think he'd probably been on Outsiders for like maybe 6 months. And you have Dustin Nguyen. And this is As the Crow Flies, a 5-part story. You can see we've got covers here by Matt Wagner. We're actually going to have covers from him for quite a while now, for the next maybe 2 years, maybe, something like that. And basically, this is just sort of a straightforward Scarecrow story. It's sort of just deep enough to kind of keep you invested. It's a little more back to sort of the light, fluffy, you know, over-the-top villain kind of monster story that Batman sometimes gets entangled in. And this story continues through 627. We get the addition of sort of this new version of Scarecrow, which you can see on the cover here of 628, and he's called the Scare Beast. And basically it's just a mutated version of Crane, I can't think of his first name, sorry, of the Scarecrow. And one of the things that happens here is, of course, whenever you have Scarecrow involved, Batman's gonna get stung or whatever, and he's gonna get, you know, stuck with fear toxin. Now, the thing that makes this story important for things to come is that we have our second appearance of Jason Todd. Now, the first time we saw Jason Todd in Hush, it was Clayface disguised as Jason Todd. In here, he comes to him in a vision when he's suffering from the effects of the fear toxin here in issue number 629. And pretty much this whole issue is this confrontation between Batman and Jason Todd. Now, after they brought Jason Todd back in Hush, there was a lot of backlash from, you know, the fans. You know, you can't bring this guy back. You know, they've said it about Winter Soldier. They've said it about all kinds of characters that have died. Jason Todd is certainly not the first or the last of those types of characters. And it's his second appearance here in which the writing's really on the wall. Like, you know that DC is definitely going to bring Jason Todd back, and it's just kind of a question of when. Oops, don't want to spoil it. So anyway, this storyline wraps up with issue number 630, another fun Matt Wagner cover here, where basically it's just the big no-holds-barred brawl between Batman and the Scare Beast, which is, of course, just regular Scarecrow. And that's where we're going to leave it off today. Tomorrow we'll have a short little haul for a very big crossover that happened right after this, and then we will continue on to, well, I don't want to spoil it. That's 2 days away. See you soon.